A country with no real navy, using weapons it mostly built in garages and repurposed jet skis, has done something that hasn't happened in modern military history. It has driven one of the world's largest naval fleets completely out of its own home port. This isn't an exaggeration, and it isn't speculation. According to Ukraine's own Ministry of Defense, roughly 30% of Russia's entire Black Sea Fleet combat strength has been destroyed or seriously damaged since the war began, and the fleet's flagship, along with dozens of other vessels, now sits at the bottom of the sea. Today, we're walking through exactly how this happened, ship by ship, weapon by weapon, based entirely on real, documented events. No speculation, no invented scenarios, just one of the most remarkable naval campaigns in recent history. To understand how dramatic this story actually is, you need to understand exactly what Russia's Black Sea Fleet looked like at the very start of this war. According to reporting from National Security Journal, when Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, its Black Sea Fleet entered the conflict with 74 warships and a flagship cruiser, facing a Ukrainian navy that had almost no operational warships of its own to speak of. On paper, this wasn't supposed to be a contest at all. Russia had overwhelming naval superiority, and its fleet was assigned a central role across multiple phases of the planned invasion, expected to support amphibious landings, blockade Ukrainian ports, and dominate the entire coastline without serious resistance. That's not remotely how it actually played out. The first major crack in that assumption came just weeks into the war, in April of 2022, when Ukrainian forces tracked down the Moskva, the flagship of Russia's entire Black Sea Fleet, using a combination of radar tracking and intelligence assistance. According to reporting from The Conversation, Ukrainian forces launched 2 domestically built Neptune anti-ship missiles at the cruiser, striking it and igniting its onboard ammunition. Despite efforts by the crew to save the ship, the Moskva sank the following day while under tow back towards Sevastopol. This was, according to multiple military historians, Russia's first loss of a flagship vessel since the Russo-Japanese War more than a century earlier, and the largest warship sunk in combat since World War II. The significance of losing the Moskva specifically goes well beyond just the value of a single ship, expensive as it was. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, the Moskva had been providing air defense cover for the entire Russian naval group in the Black Sea using its S-300F missile system, functioning essentially as a protective umbrella for the rest of the fleet. Once that umbrella was gone, the remaining Russian vessels became dramatically more vulnerable to Ukrainian aircraft and drone strikes, a vulnerability that directly contributed to Ukraine's ability to liberate Zminy Island, also known as Snake Island, and reopen the grain export corridor that had been blocked since the invasion began. In the days immediately following the Moskva's sinking, according to multiple reports, the rest of Russia's smaller naval vessels pulled back, choosing to operate roughly 20 miles farther from the Ukrainian coastline than they previously had. The single tactical retreat effectively ended Russian plans to launch a major amphibious assault on the port city of Odessa, one of the most strategically important cities on Ukraine's entire coastline. A war that Russian naval planners had expected to dominate from the very first weeks had already, within less than 2 months, been fundamentally reshaped by a country that supposedly didn't have a real navy to speak of. This is really where the most fascinating part of this entire story begins, because Ukraine's continued success against the Black Sea Fleet over the following years wasn't primarily driven by traditional naval combat at all. It was driven by innovation, specifically the development of something the world had genuinely never seen deployed in real combat before. According to reporting from The Conversation, starting in the spring of 2022, Ukrainian engineers, working with relatively little external help at first, began designing and building what became the world's first combat-deployed sea drone, a system known as the Magura V-5. This wasn't a small, symbolic weapon. These explosive-laden unmanned vessels were built specifically to travel long distances across genuinely rough, stormy seas, remaining undetected by traditional radar, carrying between 500 and 700 pounds of explosives directly to their targets. The very first real test of this new weapon was aimed directly at the heart of Russian naval power in the region, the base at Sevastopol in occupied Crimea. According to the same reporting, at 4 in the morning on October 19, 2022, between 6 and 8 remotely guided Magura Sea drones entered the harbor at Sevastopol and successfully damaged the Admiral Makarov, which had become the new flagship of the Black Sea Fleet following the Moskva's sinking, along with a minesweeper operating alongside it. This single raid demonstrated something that fundamentally changed the entire character of this naval conflict. A country with no meaningful traditional navy had just proven it could reach directly into one of Russia's most heavily defended naval bases and strike its most valuable remaining ships. Ukraine didn't stop there. Once the initial success of the Magura drones had been proven in real combat, Ukrainian forces began deploying them far more widely and aggressively. According to reporting reviewed from The Conversation, these sea drones went on to strike an enormous range of Russian naval targets, including tugboats, patrol boats, assault boats, corvettes, trawlers, minesweepers, and landing ships. One particularly dramatic strike involved several drones repeatedly hitting and ultimately sinking the Ivanovets, a Russian missile corvette, with footage released by Ukraine's Group 13 unit showing the ship's own crew desperately firing into the water at the incoming drones before the vessel was finally struck and destroyed. Combined with cruise missiles supplied by the United Kingdom and France, this wave of drone attacks and missile strikes ultimately sank or damaged 26 separate Russian vessels. Facing mounting losses at Sevastopol, Russia made the decision that would come to define the next phase of this entire campaign, relocating the bulk of its surviving Black Sea fleet away from Crimea entirely, to what it believed would be the relative safety of Novorossiysk, a major naval base located on Russia's own mainland coastline, far outside the range of most conventional weapons Ukraine had access to at that point in the war. According to the Wikipedia-documented timeline of the Black Sea Fleet's history, this relocation followed repeated Ukrainian strikes that had exposed just how vulnerable Russian naval assets remained even at bases inside occupied Crimea, reducing Russia's overall ability to operate safely from the peninsula at all. If Russian naval commanders believed this retreat to their own mainland territory would finally provide real safety, that assumption didn't survive very long either. According to the Conversation's reporting, buoyed by the success of the original Magura drones, Ukrainian engineers developed a new generation of longer-range sea drones, known as Sea Babies and Mamais, specifically designed to travel distances of nearly 500 miles across the entire Black Sea in order to reach Russian vessels sheltering at their new base. These more advanced drones weren't limited to direct ship strikes either. According to the same reporting, Sea Baby drones have also been used to deploy naval mines that sank at least 4 additional ships, to strike the strategically vital Kerch Bridge connecting Russia to occupied Crimea, and even to carry rocket launchers capable of firing missiles at both land and sea targets from the drone platform itself. The scale of what this new generation of weapons accomplished against Novorossiysk, specifically, is genuinely staggering when you look at the documented timeline. According to Ukraine's own Ministry of Defense, on March 2nd of this year, Ukrainian forces launched a large-scale overnight attack involving more than 200 drones against Novorossiysk, the very base Russia had relocated to specifically to escape exactly this kind of threat. The strike sank the minesweeper Valentin Pikul outright, while 2 additional anti-submarine warfare ships, the Yeysk and the Kasimov, sustained serious damage to both their hulls and their propulsion systems. According to the ministry's own assessment, the loss of the Valentin Pikul specifically degraded Novorossiysk's ability to conduct mine countermeasures, while the damage to the other 2 vessels further reduced Russia's capacity to defend against exactly the kind of unmanned surface vehicle attacks that had already proven so devastating at Sevastopol. Then, just over a month later, on April 6th, Ukraine launched a second major combined strike against the same base. According to multiple sources, including United 24 Media and Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, this attack inflicted critical damage to the Admiral Makarov, the very frigate that had become the fleet's de facto flagship after the Moskva's sinking 2 years earlier. The strike specifically damaged the ship's superstructure and its Kalibr missile launch systems, according to the National Security Journal's reporting, effectively rendering the vessel that had been serving as the fleet's flagship functionally out of action. This detail alone tells you something remarkable about the trajectory of this entire campaign. Ukraine had now managed to functionally disable 2 separate Russian flagship vessels in the same war, the original Moskva and its eventual replacement, using 2 completely different generations of weapons technology developed largely on its own. The same April combined operation against Novorossiysk also struck the frigate Admiral Essen, according to the documented list of ship losses tracked on Wikipedia. Fires aboard that vessel reportedly burned for over 18 hours, and subsequent battle damage assessments indicated significant internal damage, along with critical damage specifically to its ability to fire Kalibr cruise missiles, leaving the ship unable to strike Ukrainian territory at all going forward. Around this same period, Ukraine's security service also conducted a separate coordinated special forces operation targeting naval bases directly in occupied Crimea, striking the landing ships Yamal and Filchenkov, along with the reconnaissance ship Ivan Kurs, while a related strike on the nearby Belbek military airfield damaged a MiG-31 fighter jet and the airfield's broader operational infrastructure. It's worth pausing here to really sit with what all of this cumulative damage actually represents, because the individual strikes, as dramatic as each one is on its own, only tell part of the story. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, by early 2026, approximately 30% of the entire Black Sea Fleet's combat assets had been destroyed or seriously damaged since the war began. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, in its own analysis of this campaign, described the outcome in stark terms, stating that Ukraine's asymmetric approach has rendered Russia's Black Sea Fleet functionally useless as an offensive naval force. That's an extraordinary assessment for any serious international policy research organization to make about one of the world's largest naval powers, and it reflects just how thoroughly this entire campaign has reshaped the actual balance of power in this specific theater of the war. Let's talk about why this particular naval campaign has become such an important case study for military strategists, well beyond just this specific conflict, because the implications genuinely extend far past just Ukraine and Russia. For decades, traditional naval doctrine assumed that meaningfully challenging a major naval power essentially required building a comparable fleet of your own expensive warships facing off against other expensive warships in relatively conventional engagements. Ukraine's campaign against the Black Sea Fleet has effectively disproven that assumption in real time, demonstrating that a much smaller, much less expensive combination of missiles, drones, and precision strikes can, under the right conditions, neutralize an enormous conventional naval force without ever needing to build anything resembling a comparable fleet at all. According to the Carnegie Endowment's analysis, this concept, sometimes referred to as strategic neutralization, has already proven that it's possible to render a major navy functionally useless without fully destroying every individual ship or matching that navy vessel for vessel. This shift hasn't gone unnoticed by military analysts and defense planners around the world, and it's genuinely reshaping how naval strategy is being reconsidered globally, not just within the specific context of this war. If a much smaller, much less wealthy country can achieve this level of disruption against one of the world's largest conventional navies using relatively inexpensive drones and domestically produced missiles, it raises serious and immediate questions for every major naval power about how vulnerable their own traditional surface fleets might actually be to exactly this kind of asymmetric, technology-driven challenge in a future conflict. The pressure on Russia's remaining naval assets has continued mounting even in the very recent weeks leading up to this video. According to reporting from Euromaidan Press, as of early July, the pro-Ukrainian partisan movement Atesh claimed that the Black Sea Fleet is now actively planning to relocate its headquarters yet again, this time away from Sevastopol entirely toward Novorossiysk, with reports suggesting that officers had already privately begun moving their own families out of Sevastopol and into new residences near the fleet's fallback base, notably without official military orders authorizing that relocation. If accurate, this detail suggests something genuinely significant about morale and confidence within the fleet's own officer corps. Individuals reportedly making unofficial personal decisions to relocate their families away from what has become one of the most consistently targeted military installations in the entire war. It's worth being fair and precise here about exactly what this campaign has and hasn't accomplished, because the real story is genuinely impressive without needing any exaggeration. Russia's Black Sea Fleet has not been completely destroyed as an organization. It retains submarines, missile-capable vessels, and a meaningful number of surviving ships, and it continues to pose a real threat, particularly through its remaining Kaliber cruise missile capability launched from vessels that haven't been directly hit. But according to virtually every serious military analysis of this campaign, from Ukraine's own Ministry of Defense to independent organizations like the Carnegie Endowment and National Security Journal, the fleet has been transformed from an offensive force capable of dominating the entire region into a fleet fighting primarily for its own survival, repeatedly forced to relocate, repeatedly losing high-value vessels even at what it hoped would be safer, more distant bases, and increasingly unable to operate with any real confidence anywhere near Ukrainian-controlled waters or the weapon systems Ukraine has continued to develop against it. This is genuinely one of the most important lessons to take away from this entire story, and it's worth making explicit before we wrap up. Ukraine's success here wasn't the product of a single dramatic weapon or a single decisive battle. It was the product of sustained innovation over multiple years, starting with domestically built anti-ship missiles, expanding into the world's first combat-proven sea drones, and continuing to evolve into longer-range systems specifically designed to chase Russia's fleet to wherever it tried to retreat next. Each time Russia adapted, relocating its ships, adjusting its defenses, Ukraine developed the next generation of technology specifically capable of reaching whatever new position Russia had moved to. That kind of sustained, adaptive innovation, rather than any single knockout blow, is really what has produced this remarkable ongoing outcome. If this breakdown of how Ukraine actually managed to neutralize one of the world's largest naval fleets without ever building a comparable navy of its own was useful to you, let me know in the comments which part of this campaign surprised you most. Whether it's the sinking of the Moskva at the very start of the war, the world's first combat use of sea drones at Sevastopol, or the fact that Russia's own officers are reportedly now quietly relocating their families away from Crimea. I read every comment, and this community consistently shapes which parts of this ongoing conflict we dig into next. If you found this useful, do me a favor and hit that share button, send it to someone who's been following the naval side of this war, and drop a like so more people get an accurate, sourced look at one of the most remarkable military campaigns happening anywhere in the world right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.